Hey retro gamers. Today on Smashing Bricks, we're heading back to 1996 to hunt for mysterious ancient treasures in Tomb Raider for the Sega Saturn and What the heck? Is that a dinosaur? Hey, welcome back to Smashing Bricks, a retro gaming podcast. This is episode 35. My name is Eddie Inzauto, and today I'm joined once again by my regular guest. You know him, you love him. He's Anthony LaBella. Debatable.
Hello, everyone.
we heard
it's good
you.
to be back, Eddie.
We heard you sneak in that debatable.
Yeah, that was someone else saying that. That wasn't me.
Hey man, what's happening?
I feel like this is the point in the year since we're recording this here in December where I'm frantically playing through a bunch of games I wanted to try before I put my Game of the Year list together. Because one of my favorite traditions every December is to write my Game of the Year list. So I've been catching up on some shorter indie games that I want to see if they make the top 10.
Oh man, you just brought back stressful memories for me. For every year that we had to do end of year awards and stuff,
awards.
I had to play full games, like big AAA releases that I had missed, and just
marquee
jam
titles,
them all in.
Yeah.
Oh my god!
Which is always the optimal way to experience a game, of course.
Yeah, of course. That probably didn't really serve me well. Anyway, what's your best thing you've played so far this year, new from 2024?
I mean, you're telling me to give away the Game of the Year?
Sort of.
Okay,
I guess that's what I asked. I mean, I realize that it's a big ask.
So I'm torn between two games. I'll say one of the games I'm torn that I might give Game of the Year to is UFO 50, which I had mentioned to you briefly. That. Yeah, so big fan of that one. That might be Game of the Year.
Okay. So it stood the test of time. Okay, so there's that. But if we go all the way back to 1996, we are playing another Game of the Year contender, or we played another Game of the Year contender from 1996 called Tomb Raider. And, I should add, this podcast sponsored by Persons for the Equitable Treatment of Animals. So yeah, Tomb Raider was an action adventure / platformer, but really kind of an early entry in what we've come to call the traversal genre, really, right?
It's kind of weird. We'll get into it as we talk about the game, but I feel like it's kind of hard to give it a specific genre, which kind of surprised me. I guess in my mind, I think of Tomb Raider as an action adventure series, but it's got a lot of different components going on.
But it's certainly platformy. I mean, it's got jumping, climbing, swimming, activating switches, finding keys, and shooting. And we'll talk about all those things. But first, what was your prior relationship with Tomb Raider?
Yeah, so the series in general, this has been a big blind spot for me. And it's funny because I actually started a blog series this year where I am trying to play through PlayStation 1 games I missed out on as a kid, because all I played as a kid was JRPGs like Final Fantasy, Legend of Dragoon, Chrono Cross, all of those. So I missed out on a lot of the classics or notable titles like a Tomb Raider, like a Silent Hill, etc. So I actually started a blog series where I'm trying to relive some old PlayStation games in 2024. So I was really excited to try Tomb Raider because the only Tomb Raider I've ever played is the 2013, I guess, reboot, you might call it. And that is it. I know Lara Croft. I know the series.
You've heard of Lara Croft?
I saw it all the time. You might say I've heard of Lara Croft, but never with that hands-on experience of playing the older games. So, pretty much new to me.
Wow, that's pretty cool. I love that you're doing that. Obviously, I'm doing something similar. But it's funny
Nice.
that you played all the JRPGs and missed the other games, because I find that I missed like the majority of the JRPGs on the
Right,
Super Nintendo
opposite.
and PlayStation. I need to make another disclaimer. I'm gonna say Laura. Like
Oh
a
boy.
lot of the time, I'm gonna
So
say
please
Laura.
avoid sending in your fan
Yeah,
mail, your
I
angry
mean,
complaints.
yeah. I mean to say Lara. I'm
He means no harm.
it's just gonna come out that way. So
Right.
this game stars Lara Croft, and I first encountered Lara Croft either in 96 or in 97. My friend Nick had a PlayStation. I had a Nintendo 64, and I would go over to his house and we would play games. We talked about it on the Crash Bandicoot episode and on the Resident Evil episode. And this was one of those games. However, it was very hard for us back then, or at least for me. It seemed like just a very hard game to control. And
Yeah.
I could tell that it was good, and I only really participated in a little bit of it at that time. But I had just recently bought my first console that I ever paid for with my own money, the Nintendo 64. So I had chosen my country to fight for in these wars.
Your allegiance had
And
been.
the main thing
Yeah.
that I said about Tomb Raider back then, I remember this, was that Mario was better.
I find it hilarious to directly compare Mario to Lara Croft. Well, Lara Croft isn't as good as Mario.
Well, it was like, it was the main PlayStation game at the time,
Right, the
in my
flagship
perception,
title, yeah.
and Mario was that too. But also the platforming, the jumping, the,
Right,
the
platformer
grabbing.
versus
They did
platformer.
some of the same things that we had never seen, or that we haven't seen much of up until
Right.
1996. They both jump and grab on the edge of walls and pull themselves up. They both do backflips. Their skill set was very similar, despite the games being wildly different overall.
And I guess I forget about that timeline, right? Because Mario 64 was 96 as well, right?
Yeah, Mario 64 came out 2 months earlier. 1 month
Wow.
earlier, really. Mario 64 was September 29th in the US anyway. And the earliest release of Tomb Raider was October 25th in Europe.
Wow.
Yeah.
I take that for granted how close they were in release date.
Mm-hmm. And the PlayStation obviously had already been out for like about a year or so. But I don't really recall what was big on the PlayStation in that first year. I remember playing Tekken, which came out in November 95. That was like one of the main ones that I played on the PlayStation. But the other early one was Crash Bandicoot and Tomb Raider. Those are the ones that I really remember kicking things off. And this could bring us right into the game history. As I said, October 25th, 96, it was released on the Sega Saturn in the EU. So this is a Sega Saturn game originally.
That is so weird. I remember when we were texting about what game should we do and landed on Tomb Raider. I think we were both shocked to learn it is an original Saturn release.
I was hyped.
What? Does not compute.
Yeah, but it's funny we're saying that because it's not actually true. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Yeah, on November 14th, 96, it came out on the Saturn, PlayStation, and MS-DOS in North America. Then November 22nd, it hit PlayStation and DOS in Europe. And then finally, in January and February of 97, it came to the Saturn and PlayStation, respectively, in Japan. It had a bunch of ports. Mac OS in 99, Pocket PC and N-Gage in 2002 and 3.
N-Gage.
Yeah. The PlayStation version came to PSN in 2009. The DOS version landed on Steam in 2012 and apparently had a glitch where there was no music, which is a crime, which we'll talk about also. It hit iOS and Android in 2013 and 2015. And this year, on Valentine's Day, Tomb Raider 1 through 3 Remastered came to the PlayStation 4 and 5 and the Xbox One and S and X and Windows, Steam, and the Switch. So, should have played those. Didn't. Yeah. So it's been on a lot of stuff. The series obviously is huge. There have been about 23, I think, main releases in the series. Wow. Over 20. But it all started with this. This was made by Core Design. Lara Croft herself, and the whole concept of the game was conceptualized by Toby Gard, who became the game's artist and kind of the lead on the project, I think. I
think that's right.
I didn't write down if there was a director. It wasn't. It was a 6-person team ultimately, and it started with just 2 people. It was Toby Gard and Paul Douglas, the programmer. And Core Design was an English dev studio. They had originally made a bunch of games for the 8 and 16-bit personal computers that were over there, like the Amstrad CPC and the Atari ST and the Amiga, all those things that you and I have probably never played. Have you ever played any of those?
Right. Definitely not. No Amiga for me, sorry.
Only my UK guests talk about that.
This is for all you Europeans out there listening.
Yeah. They first started working with Sega in 1991 when they made Chuck Rock, which was a mainstay on Nick Arcade, if you know that show. But, okay, here's what I was talking about before, how it actually wasn't a Sega game, despite their relationship with Sega. This arose in a brainstorming session in 1994 for the upcoming PlayStation console. They were trying to figure out games that would be good for the PlayStation. So Toby Gard presented this, and it was greenlit after the entire staff supported the idea. They thought it was a great idea. It was going to happen. They wanted to focus mainly on a cinematic presentation of a 3D character-driven experience. Originally, this was a male Indiana Jones type, and they changed that for legal reasons before production. And Lara Croft was originally Laura Cruz, but Eidos wanted that changed. Eidos also wanted them to switch it back to a man, but the team refused. And when they asked for a name change, probably because they're racist, they went with Lara Croft. So Tomb Raider began production in 1994. It took 18 months, and for the first 6 months, it was just Gard and Douglas. Then they expanded the team to 6 people by adding Neil Boyd and Heather Gibson, who were level designers and artists. They had a writer, Vicky Arnold, come in and take the main story and put it into dialogue. And, of course, the composer, Nathan McCree, and one more person who I left off, who is going to write in with an angry letter to this podcast.
Yeah, they did a lot for this game, and you have not included them.
Oh, actually, that was 6. I can't count.
Oh.
The tradition of me not being able to count.
Well, yeah, there's no 7th ghost. Yeah, it's just those 6 people. Yeah. We got it.
Okay. So 6 people. That is crazy.
That's, for one of the biggest 3D titles of the era. Yeah. Wow.
So they read up a lot about Incan, Greek, and Egyptian history. And you know what's funny? I found out that Greece was only added after Cambodia and Angkor Wat was dropped. And I feel like Cambodia and Angkor Wat really fit somehow a little bit better to me. I think just the cultures, I don't know, something about it. Mm-hmm. But they switched away. I wonder why. We don't know. I'm sure we could find out one day, but I didn't. So Core Design was sold to a company called Center Gold in the middle of production, and then that was bought by Eidos in 1996. And thanks to this deal in the PAL territories for Sega to get the game almost a full month earlier, they had a lot of crunch and overtime at the end of the development cycle. And it was pretty stressful for the team there at the end. And then you got this game on the Saturn that is, I mean, all the versions are notably different looking and feeling from one another. I guess we'll talk about that a little later. Find out what you played. But some of the contemporary titles I talked about already. We had Resident Evil and Crash and Mario 64 all in 1996. Those were like, big PlayStation titles and the big Nintendo sort of competitor. So it was a big,
and this
big
is
time.
where we gotta plug the Crash Bandicoot episode,
Woo!
Which I did, of Smashing Bricks.
Of which you called it a brick, I think. Is that right?
I believe so,
what a
right?
jerk. That might be the only episode where I called the game a smash and the other person called it a brick.
I was torn, though, remember? It wasn't a resounding brick.
Yeah, we got to go listen to it again. Because, I don't know, maybe you'll change your mind if you ever play that one again. And yes, it's true. That is the only time I ever called the game a smash while the other person called it a brick. Whereas 1, 2, Confirmed. 3, 4, 5 other times I called it a brick when the other person called it a smash. Anyway, moving on. What are we talking about? It sold 7 million copies worldwide up until now, and 2.5 million by 1997. So when they say by 1997, I don't know if that is inclusive of 1997 or if that means it sold that much just in 96. Like a month, which would be crazy. But it was Christmas. That would be, yeah. One interesting fact was IDOS went from a $2.6 million loss to a $14.5 million profit on the back of this one game.
Save the company.
Jeez, yeah. This was one of the first platinum games on the PlayStation. They're sort of like greatest hits for the PlayStation. Mm-hmm. And it was the best-selling game in the franchise until the first game that Anthony LaBella played in the franchise in 2013. Yeah. And from what I understand, so I also didn't play a ton of this franchise overall. And I just feel like I've been reading that this first game is held in very high regard by fans of the series as something sort of special that lost a bit with the sequels, but I can't really agree or disagree with that. But it's interesting to read. A press release from IDOS indicated that it won Game of the Year from GameFan, PS Extreme, and Computer Player, while Ultra Game Players gave Tomb Raider the PlayStation Game of the Year and Adventure Game of the Year, and PC Gamer gave it its Action Game of the Year and a Special Achievement Award in Graphics. In 1999, Next Gen listed Tomb Raider as number 22 in its top 50 games of all time, and 2001, GameSpot listed Tomb Raider on its 15 most influential games of all time. And then in 2004, the official UK PlayStation magazine chose Tomb Raider as the 4th best game of all time. I guess they got to stick with their countrywoman
official properties.
Yeah. Also in 1999, Toby Gard and Paul Douglas won the Berners-Lee Interactive BAFTA Award for Best Contribution to the Industry for the Tomb Raider franchise, which is really cool. It's kind of like a lifetime achievement sort of award,
Right.
And then in 2018, the Strong National Museum of Play inducted Tomb Raider into its World Video Game Hall of Fame.
Nice.
Yeah. As for video game reviews of the time, we have a total aggregate score on game rankings for the PC, PlayStation, and Saturn versions coming in at 92, 90, and 87% respectively. And you have some ratings like CVG giving the Saturn version 5 stars, Edge giving the PC and PlayStation versions 9 out of 10, EGM giving the PlayStation version 9.125 out of 10, Famitsu gave it a 28 out of 40 on the PlayStation and a 31 out of 40 on the Saturn, interestingly enough. Game Revolution, A, and A- for the Saturn. GameSpot, 8.5, 8.5, and 7.9 for the Saturn. GameZone reviewed the PC version with a 7 out of 10, and IGN reviewed the PlayStation version with a 9.3 out of 10. Next Gen gave the Saturn version a 5-star rating out of 5, and Sega Saturn magazine gave it a 92%. Mm-hmm. So those are some good ratings.
Those are real good ratings. It's interesting to see some give the Saturn version a better rating, and then some give the PlayStation version a better rating.
Which is weird, because the Saturn version's worse. But, okay, so that's what...
Oh, okay, he's saying it right now. He opened the Pandora's box and just said it.
I was not part of this console war between the PlayStation and Saturn. I didn't care. I was in my own Nintendo world. But yeah, so that's what all these people thought of it. But what did we think of it? Because we played it.
We did.
We played the game. Okay, so yeah, we played the game. I guess the first question is, how did you play it?
Yeah, so as I've been going back to old PlayStation 1 games, I was first playing everything on my Steam Deck, and then I got a device called a Mister, which lets you emulate games up through the PS1 Saturn era in a very accurate way. You can hook up controllers via USB. So I played it on my Mister on my HD TV, and it scaled it correctly and looked like the authentic thing. Was trying to get as close to playing it on an old PS1 as I could conceivably do.
Did you play it on a cathode ray tube television?
Oh, I wish. I wish I had one of those. That's the next step, but that would be silly if I got that, probably. I shouldn't be spending my money that way, but that would be the next step.
You got to get the classic 19-inch that everyone had. That was like the standard regular person CRT TV.
Well, my eyesight is worse now that I'm older, so my eyes can't handle it anymore.
Put it on your desk. Imagine you sit on a CRT.
Replace the PC monitor.
Desk. I like it. Okay. Well, that's a really cool way to play it. I played the Saturn version to start. Mm-hmm. And then I decided to dabble in the PlayStation version, and I stuck with the PlayStation version.
Okay.
I learned only in the last couple days that I have the whole series on Steam, the original PC versions when they were ported over. Yeah. I don't have the, whatever it's called, the remaster, but that would be a cool way to play it for anyone who wants to now. I'm sure there are improvements.
And I'm pretty sure the remaster has that option where you can click a button to change from new to old visuals like immediately, which is always really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was like the same thing for Another World that we played for the show.
Oh, yeah.
That same thing. Okay, so that's how we played the game. I will go right out on a limb and say I much preferred the control setup for the PlayStation, because you have two fundamentally different controllers between these two, right? So you've got your 4 face buttons and 4 shoulder buttons on the PlayStation, and you've got 6 face buttons and 2 shoulder buttons on the Saturn. And I just felt like with all of the controls that you're doing, the setup with the extra index and middle finger buttons just made it a lot more controllable for me. So that's why I stuck with the PlayStation version. And then graphically, there are a bunch of differences too.
Right. For the controls, I feel like that's a real game changer, because like you alluded to, there's a lot to do, or a lot of buttons being used at any given moment to get just the right platforming going. Yeah. So I guess I take for granted that the controller layout plays a huge part of this experience, depending on the version.
Yeah. Let's just quickly talk about some of the things you can do. On the PlayStation controller, Lara can do a sidestep left and right with the shoulder buttons. I guess the R2 and L2. And then on L1 and R1, you have your look, where you hold it down and then you can move your D-pad. Because remember, this is before analog control on the PlayStation. This was all D-pad stuff. So you would hold down the L button so you could look around while standing stationary. And then the R button was to make her walk, because she runs by default. And if you're running, you can fall off of the sides of everything. But if you're walking, you can't. Super important. Then you have
really important.
Yeah. Then you have a jump button, an action button, a roll button, and a equip and unequip your selected weapon button. Mm-hmm. That's everything. But with that, you can do so much.
Right. So really the kind of sidestep and positioning combined with the jump button can result in a lot of different things. So I know when I was playing, the move I would typically try to pull off is, I think it's if you hit back on the D-pad and then up immediately and then square, which is the jump button, you'll do kind of I think it's more of a further jump with more momentum versus just kind of running off the ledge. You can shimmy off of a ledge, and if you're holding the right button, you'll kind of grab onto the edge and you can kind of shuffle along the side of things. You can do a backflip, or like a side flip as well. Trying to think, what else can you do?
It's kind of a lot of stuff. If you press back, she'll do a jump backward. And sometimes you want to use that in combination with the action button to drop off of a ledge and catch yourself by your hands, which is a really cool move. And then later on, I realized that you can let go, fall, and then press the action button again to grab on another ledge as you're falling down, which is really cool.
Right, because the X button is used as that action button. So anytime you're trying to do that, or even just if you're making a long jump and you're going to only kind of grab onto the ledge, you need to hit the X button or you will fall. So everything is very intentional in how they're using the controls. None of it really feels automated like we think of, a lot of 3D series like an Uncharted, Assassin's Creed.
Yeah.
There is none of that in there. You need to make sure you are pressing the ledge grab button, the action button. You need to make sure you are holding walk so you don't fall off the edge. And I learned that maybe the hard way is the wrong answer, because there's a nice tutorial level at the beginning, but
that I skipped.
Oh, really? Oh, that was so necessary for me.
Yeah, I did something dumb this time. I didn't read the manual. I opened the manual for like a week on my computer in just an open tab. Didn't read it, and then also didn't do the tutorial.
The tutorial is really nice because you're in Lara's house and there's kind of an obstacle course that's teaching you the different ways to run and jump and grab a ledge, and it's
and she's
kind of
talking
walking
to you,
through
right?
all the different controls. And she's talking to you.
It's probably the most
herself,
she talks throughout the game.
Honestly, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that I would recommend doing, because I was figuring things out kind of organically deep into the game and just laughing at
when
myself,
death
thinking,
awaits you at every corner. Yeah,
I should have known all this stuff a little bit sooner.
Right. If you fall in her house, it's a short little obstacle course. If you fall during the game, you're dead.
Yeah. I had to figure out how to do a standing still forward jump without pressing forward to run. Because, so this game...
Yes,
this game is built
a
on a voxel grid. So that's a grid, but in 3 dimensions, like Minecraft, right? But essentially, the spaces are much larger cubes. And all of Lara's movements, and this is brilliant, right? All of her movements and actions are tied directly to the measurements of this grid. So if you press the jump button and forward, she'll jump, I think, 1 box forward, or 2, whatever it is. She'll jump a certain distance forward. But if you step to the back of the square that you're on and then hold forward and press jump, she will take an extra 2 steps, which normally have you fall off a ledge by accident until you realize, and then she will jump. Because they tied everything perfectly to the cycle of the animation. which is why they didn't do any motion capture, because they had to have all of these actions and animations line up to leave her in the exact same state at the end of each of the actions.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that's a great microcosm of it, the one you just reiterated there, of kind of, it's almost like you're hitting jump before you're hitting forward.
You
do
are.
That smaller
you have
jump.
to.
It's right. It's square and then forward.
Yeah.
Versus the other one that is back, forward, square. And I love that.
Yeah, it's very specific. The combinations of buttons lead you to do the things in a very, very key way. It reminds me, actually, now that we're talking about it, of Mirror's Edge, how I felt playing that game and having to run and jump and do the wall kick and the turn and then the grab. Maybe you didn't have to grab in that one. Maybe you did. But, you know, you were constantly like using all your fingers to do all the different individual tiny component actions of the larger gross motor skills that she's performing on the screen. Mm-hmm. And it's cool.
It feels like, in those moments, a true platformer, which is one of my favorite genres, right? I'll play any platformer. I grew up on Mario. All the really hard 2D ones like Celeste, I've gotten all the strawberries in Celeste and all that. I love a good challenge. I love something that's very methodical or purposeful. And that really shocked me about Tomb Raider. It ended up being one of my favorite things about the game when I played. And it's funny because I would look at Reddit threads just kind of people playing it years after the fact for the first time. And a lot of complaints would be, well, the controls are very dated. It's hard to get used to. But that's one of the things I love about this game, is that the platforming is so intentional and really feels like a decision on the designer's part rather than just a means to an end like it is in a lot of 3D games nowadays, where, you know, you kind of auto climb or auto run. It's just a point A to point B method, versus this is a game mechanic. You are learning the controls and you're learning how to platform through these tombs and these environments.
You are very much participating in the action in this game. It also, when I was playing, I wrote down that it feels like a true 3D reimagining of the original two-dimensional Prince of Persia. Because the animations and Lara's abilities, right? So sure, she can jump really high and really far and do really cool stuff, but it's all pretty grounded in kind of what a person could do, except she's got like she got like LeBron James hops. And she's very long. She's very long,
very lanky and long and great.
Yeah, she's kind of like Jack Skellington. Especially on the PlayStation version. I noticed she's like a little bit more human proportioned on the Saturn version, and then she's like thinned out and taller on the PlayStation version. But actually, I think on both versions she's stretched out because of the difference in resolution on like UK TVs versus US TVs.
Yeah.
But then the game runs at a faster rate in the US because of 60 hertz versus 50. So I feel like what I discovered from my reading and my research was that version plays a little bit more clunky than the NTSC version. But anyway, so in this way, she's doing these things and the animations are kind of slow and very human. You know, she pulls herself up slowly over a ledge. She doesn't like fly up there, and she does a crazy backflip, right? But for a lot of the other stuff, it's very real and kind of slow and based on these very precise spacings. You know, you press back on the D-pad and she hops back that very exact same amount for each time you press back. Or if you hold it, she'll hop back once, that exact amount, hop back again, that exact amount. So that as you're playing and you're getting used to her moves and how they relate to the grid that the levels are built on, you're getting a real understanding for what moves reach how far, what you're
Right.
seeing on the screen, how you can like take that visual information and turn it into the knowledge of which of the moves is the right one to do in which area. And it's really
It makes
cool.
me think, it makes me think it's the kind of game where there's going to be a speedrunning event, like a GDQ, where someone's going to play Tomb Raider blindfolded because they just know the specific movement inputs on that kind of grid.
yeah, that sounds like something that could definitely be done.
Yeah.
When I first started playing, I was taking notes on 2 different pieces of paper, apparently, because I played at different times with different notebooks. But a couple of things I said were, oh my God, I love it. I can't believe how, quote, old it feels. This is such early 3D action adventure platformer action.
Yeah.
And then on the other page, I wrote, very stiff, but feels deliberately specific and particular in this weird intentional way. It feels like a game made to show you now how games were then, or not even how they were in 1996 then, but like how they were on the PC in 1993 then.
Yeah.
Because like the vibe was just of that era, because it was one of the first 3D games, you know, it was in that very, very early time, those first 2 years essentially, and it feels that way.
It does. It feels, and I like your use of the word deliberate, and it's almost like you wonder if they had the technology or the knowledge back then, if she would have moved a little bit faster, or if the flow would have been better, or if the controls would have been different. But it's almost one of those things where sometimes when developers work within limitations, they end up with a more quality product. And I think that the technology limitations and controls and new 3D environments worked in its favor. And I don't know that everyone agrees with that.
Yeah.
Like I said, I think there's a lot of people who would play it today and go, oh my God, this is unplayable. But I definitely did not feel that way.
Well, they were solving problems. Like, well, there was no template at this time. Like we were talking about with GoldenEye, they were making this stuff up as they went, and you can really see that in the unconventional control setup. That they were like, well, we got this controller. I guess we could put this button here and that button there.
Right.
One thing that always bothers me every time is that the square button and X button feel switched to me. Like, I would much rather X be jump.
Jump on X.
Yeah. And I've done it like so many times as I was like running toward an edge and not focused. I would press X and she would just run off the ledge and put her arms up to catch nothing. And I was like, oh, there she goes.
Great. My issue would be the opposite, where I have this bear running at me or something, and I'm okay. Let me shoot it in the face. Oh no, I hit the jump button, and now I'm dead.
Yep. Yep. Oh man. Oh yeah. So shooting, you've got to take your guns out.
Yep.
And when you have your guns out, you can't platform.
Correct.
You can jump and backflip and side flip, but you can't grab because your hands have guns on them.
Right. Yeah, your action button becomes the shoot button, so you shoot with X at that point.
Yeah, which is cool. And actually, I wrote a thesis statement that I meant to say at the beginning of this section, and it's that it's a blend of pure brilliance and pure jank.
Yeah, that's a good summary there. I like that.
Because I think that's brilliant, the way that they separate the combat and the platforming in a way that only makes sense, because she's got to have the guns in her hands to shoot them, and she's got to put them away to be able to climb. And games typically don't think about that. And it's a lot like what you were talking about. Things are more automated now, which, you know, makes for a smooth gameplay experience. But again, this just is a consideration while you're playing that is really rewarding to do. Although,
well,
how do you feel about the combat
while we're
itself?
on the topic? Yeah, I was just about to say, while we're on the topic, do you agree with me that this game would be so much better if there was literally no combat?
Yeah. Or if
it shouldn't have combat.
You know what I like? I like the weak enemies that are like tests of you reacting and doing the shoot action, you know, pulling the guns out and shooting.
Yeah.
But what I don't like is that so many of these cuddly creatures that you murder take, I don't know, 20 bullets to kill.
Yeah, they're bullet sponges for sure.
Seems excessive.
Yeah, because then it ends up being really boring, where you're just holding the X button and kind of moving a little bit so you don't get hit, and still holding the X button, and then they're dead. Like, you have infinite ammo with the pistol, so you don't really have to worry about that if you're using the pistol, but, you know, later on you get shotgun and some other weapons, and even with that, like, even with potential ammo management and kind of hunting for secrets so you get more ammo, just none of the combat ever felt good.
Yeah.
And it took away from the experience, because I wanted to explore, I wanted to solve puzzles, I wanted to climb and platform. And any moment I was in combat, I was thinking I'd rather be doing any of those things.
Yep. Yeah, same. And the funny thing is, this game was originally going to be more combat focused.
Really?
And then they opted to shift more toward the climbing, which was a really good choice.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the later Prince of Persia games, since we talked about Prince of Persia. Sands of Time was kind of similar. It was, you know, an updated, more smooth traversal type game. And then you would get into sections where you didn't do any of that and you just fought a bunch of guys. And it was two real, like, separate parts of the game. And that was a criticism of that game, too. Was that, like, we love running around and doing all this stuff, but the swordplay, I mean, not as good.
I think...
Same here.
Yeah, especially back then, I feel like just a lot of developers, right, get in that mindset of, well, it's a video game. Video games have combat.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it would have been just as engaging, if not more so, if there was none of that combat. Because the exploration is great. The platforming, as we mentioned, is very deliberate and engaging. But I think you still end up with a very engaging and unique experience, even if there was no combat.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so, too. Speaking of the overall structure, essentially maybe we should talk about what the story of the game is. So Lara is sitting around at like a cafe or something. I don't know what she's doing. And she's approached by some dude with a computer with like a video call of his boss, this lady, some rich lady. What's her name? Natla?
I do not remember.
Yeah, to go hunt down...
Don't ask me anything about the story.
To go hunt down a treasure that's somewhere in Peru. So Lara's like, sure, I love this. I live for this. She goes... she goes down into this ancient city to the tomb of Qualapak, whatever. Qualapak. And finds this artifact that has to do with some ancient people, and then she learns there are 3 parts of it, and then that sends her somewhere else, and she goes through these 4 levels, finds the second piece, learns a little bit more about the story, and then goes to the 3rd place, finishes, and wait a second, what the heck? We're fighting zombie demon things in this game? In the intro that I recorded before you jumped on, I did say, wait, what? Is that a dinosaur? Because there's that iconic moment early in the game that probably anyone who played this game will remember, where all of a sudden there are dinosaurs in the 3rd level, like little raptors, and then you come around this corner and you're all centered up for a T-Rex to come out of nowhere, and it's gigantic. And think about,
it's huge,
at this time in 1996 in 3D, this is the first time. I don't remember seeing the T-Rex back in the day. So encountering it now was like, oh my God. And the music kicks in, and it's just very adrenaline pumping. But yeah, so that's weird. But I also literally never knew that, just like in Uncharted many years later, that probably just took influence from this game, halfway to 2/3 of the way through the game, it goes a little crazy.
It does.
And you're fighting...
Or supernatural.
Supernatural, sort of like alien or bio-engineered or magically created life forms that look like giant zombies, centaurs with their muscles, with no skin, and they shoot orbs of red blood or something.
That's close enough.
And this lady's trying to repopulate the world because people are too weak to survive disaster or something. Oh, because she is an Atlantan also. She's not just a person.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So, yeah, that's the story in a nutshell.
That's the story. I was surprised. Two things. One thing, I was surprised at how the story is of very little consequence.
Yeah.
And how not narrative heavy this game is. Because if you had asked me before playing this, is Tomb Raider kind of a narrative game with like lots of story? I probably would have said, yeah. You get like big cutscenes between levels and Lara Croft talks a lot. Nope, not at all.
Nope.
It's barely even there.
Yeah. It's almost like Ninja Gaiden on the NES.
Yeah.
Those little cutscenes in between levels.
It is. It's like that.
And that was also something that surprised me was, so the story is kind of the foundation for the structure of the game. And what we have here are 3 main areas, each divided into 4 smaller areas. And each level it's interesting. It's presented very much in a gamey sort of way. Like, do this level, and when you get to the final door in the level, a little blob of text pops up saying you killed this many people, you got this many of the pickups,
secrets
you found this many secrets. Great, moving on. Save game. Yes.
Like a Doom level.
Yeah. And at first, I always thought that Tomb Raider was much more open, like kind of open world-ish. But early on, it just felt very linear. I was like, oh, wait, we're just kind of running to the end, and we're just doing whatever it takes to get to the end, which is essentially like find the right key to go through the right door. Which basically every level sees you in an area finding some number of keys that will unlock the final door to go to the next level. Which is not a bad design. It's a video game. I like it. And I like it when it got a little bit more complex, like later on when you get to essentially the second overall area, Greece, with St. Francis's Folly. You have the central room. You open up 4 different doors, go into 4 different areas that each have their own puzzle. And when you do those...
Yeah, the verticality there is really cool in all the side rooms. I really like that.
The verticality there is really deadly. I died more on
Very
St.
deadly
Francis's
too,
Folly than any of the 4 before it, and probably any of the rest in Greece. God. Because then I was still... The first 4 levels are pretty simple, and there isn't a lot of risk involved when you're doing things. And then you get to St. Francis Folly, and every missed jump is death.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it is do or die on every jump you're making in that level, in a way that, the game has not established up to that point.
And as we said, there's a lot of getting used to this. Or as we alluded to.
And you still were getting used to, because like you said, you hadn't done the tutorial to kind of like ease into it, so you're probably still experimenting with stuff at that point.
Definitely. So I had a little bit of trouble there. I also encountered a bug on that level that made me have to use the cheat code to skip to the next level.
Oh, that sucks.
The game froze every time I went into the Thor room, which was cool. Yeah, but anyway, I kind of like that structure. It almost feels vaguely Zelda-like in that each of the areas is kind of a dungeon, and you have kind of that central room that leads you into other rooms, each of them having individual puzzles. So how did you feel about those puzzles? You mentioned them earlier, and I felt like you had an opinion that you wanted to talk about.
Just that I guess I was also expecting with some of the puzzle solving for it to maybe be a little more complex. I mean, maybe some of it is...
Yeah, it's kind of bad to call it puzzles, even.
Yeah, you're probably right that even the word puzzle is a misnomer, because it's still more navigation and finding the right key kind of thing. So Yeah, I probably shouldn't even say puzzle. I guess I was expecting more puzzles, I should say. Because what's there isn't quite puzzle-like.
Yeah. You're exploring to find the path. And at the end of the path, right at the end of one of the paths, because sometimes you have some dead ends, and sometimes a path ends in you finding one of the secret rooms with extra ammo or med kits or whatever. But when you find the end of the path that has the key, there's the key.
Right. The puzzle's the navigation piece, right? And which, to some degree makes sense because, again, this is both a platformer and an exploration game, right? The kind of two joys of this game are you're jumping around in a very methodical, deliberate way, and you're also exploring these environments like a Tomb Raider, like the title says. I feel like this first game really speaks to the title in that you're exploring these, ancient civilizations and huge cavernous environments, and you are finding secrets and finding the right switches and the right keys. And I think that is definitely a strength of it that I remember when I played the 2013 game. I think that was a big complaint, even though it was well received, was it doesn't quite feel like Tomb Raider. It feels like they're trying to do Uncharted.
That one was a Metroidvania.
The Tomb Raider?
Yeah, remember you had to get different weapons to like
a little bit. I don't know if I'd qualify it as a Metroidvania. It had a little bit of that, but it didn't quite have a lot of that exploration heavy piece in the same way. And I feel like this first Tomb Raider kind of gives that mission statement, right? Of you are Lara Croft, you explore tombs, you explore ancient civilizations, and exploration is the name of the game. So I do think they're consistent with that, and I do think that's a strength. I just would have liked some puzzles to kind of break things up, maybe provide some different mechanics, on a minute-to-minute basis. But maybe that's just my expectations, though.
I mean, you have something like turning your lead into gold to open up the exit
the Midas
of
thing.
Palace Midas. But yeah, all the others are just like, get the stuff, and once you get the stuff, unlock the doors. And the puzzles are really just looking around the room and seeing, okay, I have to go there, then I have to go there, then I have to go there.
Yeah. I do think it speaks to the level design, though, and you kind of referenced it a bit in that it starts off pretty simply. The first few levels, they're more linear. Yeah. But I do think it opens up quite a bit as it goes, and we start seeing some of the strengths of the level design where it's that kind of looping structure that, I'm in the hub area and I'm going off to these separate rooms to get things and returning back to the hub area to go down a new path. And I really enjoyed that. And I enjoyed the complexity increasing over the course of the game, because at first I thought, I've heard a lot about this level design being great in this game.
It's a little boring in the beginning, right? It's a
little boring and simple, yeah. Like the platforming was fun, but the exploration piece wasn't what I was expecting. I think it just takes a little bit to ramp it up, and then once it does, you go, oh, okay, this is why people love the level design so much.
Like only when you get to St. Francis Folly. For example, in the Cistern, you really see that voxel grid in action, and you're doing a lot of climbing and navigating throughout the level. Right. And in some of the areas, I forget where it was, one of my favorite things was like, oh, I see a bunch of, there's like 3 slanted areas in a row, because if you fall on a slanted part of the environment, Lara will slide, and if you press jump, she'll jump off of that in the direction of the slant.
Right.
So like I was like, okay, so if I backflip onto this, she'll slide down forward, then I can jump off of it, land on the one,
chain reaction,
and then when I land on that one, if I jump again, she'll jump to the side at 90 degrees, and then I'll put her hands out by pressing the action button, she'll grab that ledge. And then you do that, and you have to like do it in a button combination at the right timing, and it happens. You're like, oh, that felt real good.
Yeah, it's one of the best feelings in the game for sure. Yeah.
So visually, I wrote a lot about the graphics, or I noticed a lot about the graphics. How'd you feel about it?
I was playing on the Mister, which again tries to replicate what it would be like playing on original hardware. So It wasn't up-resed in any way. It was like its true, pixely self of an old PS1 game.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm trying to put myself in the mind of 1996, and I feel like it looks quite impressive for early 3D. And I think the levels, like the size of the levels, is very impressive, and some of the environmental design. When you get up close on textures, some of it's a little dicey with like very flat 2D textures, but like overall I thought it looked quite good. Especially like character models and enemy models. I felt like it was a game that if I were playing in 96, I would think this looks really good. Now,
yeah, definitely.
Do I think it holds up really well? No, not really. Especially, I mean, just a lot of early 3D doesn't hold up super well. So I think, as I've been playing some older PS1 3D games, I don't think it's quite the same kind of looker that some other games are, but
it's not the worst as far as
it's not the worst. Yeah.
The early 3D goes. And on the PlayStation, I felt a lot better. When I played the Saturn version, like one of the first things I wrote was, wow, this looks terrible. And then I put, but in a nostalgic sort of way.
Right.
Because like it's nostalgic for that time. On the Saturn especially, I didn't know the Saturn did this. I knew the PlayStation did, but in actuality, the PlayStation version did it less than the Saturn version for me. It had the wiggles, the texture vertices when they don't snap into place.
Right.
So in the Saturn version especially, anytime you're moving, every wall is just like shimmering.
Oh gosh.
It's like, and the textures just look like sandpaper, like a very low grit sandpaper. So yeah, there were some interesting differences. Like the Saturn version just looked like a sloppy mess, but it had a longer draw distance. So there were areas like in the Lost Valley where you could see more of the background, or in I guess it's Egypt, or even in the Colosseum where it's just black in the background. If you're playing on the PlayStation version, I'm sure you saw that on the PlayStation version, it's just black.
Yeah.
But on the Saturn version, you can actually see a little bit further, which was surprising to me.
That's interesting.
But the PlayStation version just was much smoother, and it felt like it had better gamma, so you could see everything, and there was more clarity in what you were looking at in the PlayStation version. Because in the Saturn version, half the time I would be standing there, I'm like, I don't know what's a ledge and what is a flat wall.
I need the yellow paint. I don't know where to go.
But yeah, once I got in the PlayStation version, it felt better. And then I've watched the PC version, and it just looks way better. Like just so much smoother and clearer. So I wish I played that. I mean the DOS version. Right. There was water animation. There's the water area, and then just the surface of the water is a bunch of white squiggles. I forget if it was like that on the PlayStation or the Saturn.
That sounds familiar. I feel like maybe it's to a lesser degree on the PS1 version.
No, it's intense. But that sounds familiar. Oh yeah, I wrote, gotta check this on the PlayStation. It's a bunch of squiggly lines. Oh my god. But you know what I like is the spaces themselves. They just kind of have a realistic scale, and it's like very rough. You know, it's not intricately designed. It's not adorned with a bunch of stuff. You just feel like you're in the type of space that you're supposed to be in. Yeah. Which is cool. So that's more
a good
more
point.
art
I like
direction,
that.
I guess.
It's kind of minimal. Yeah, kind of minimalist, but in an effective way of just like, here's a real space that Lara Croft might be in.
Yeah. Yeah, I dig it. Oh, and speaking of real spaces that you're in and of the water, why is the swimming so good?
The swimming's great. All the underwater stuff is good.
I cannot believe how good being underwater is in this game.
It controls really
well. In 1996, in early 3D. And every game, most games, it's just the worst to be in water.
99% of games, it's always the worst part.
So that was a pleasant surprise. Although half the time, I missed the switches that I was looking for on the walls.
Oh, yeah. It's kind of finicky lining it up just right underwater.
Or even seeing them, noticing where they are.
Or literally seeing them.
The camera can be a little finicky too. It does it sometimes in the water, but more kind of when you're trying to see where you're going. Like, because you have to do everything slowly for the most part.
Right.
Except for a few places where it's smooth, like I said before. So a lot of the time, you're spending this time just like, okay, I'm going to turn, I'm going to rotate 10 degrees.
Right. Literally rotate 90 degrees. Yeah.
About a half a step. Then I have to hold the look button to make sure that her head is looking straight at the thing across.
Because it'll be showing her from like a profile view.
Yeah.
Because
the camera
just can't quite figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. And then if you press the look button, it kind of sneaks up right there behind her head. And you're like, okay, now I can see what's happening. And then you let go and it goes back. And
it's back to the profile,
Good thing there are tank controls. Because forward always goes forward.
I didn't think of that,
Very reliable.
Right. Yeah, actually, yeah. You know what? Guess what, everyone? I'm saying it right here. Tank controls are good.
I like tank controls.
They're good.
Tank controls I was a fan of tank controls since Resident Evil.
Yeah. It makes sense for those games.
The music is fantastic.
It's great.
And it's
really, really
I've
good.
meant to mention Dark Souls like 4 times in this podcast, so ring the bell.
Of course, how have you not done that yet?
Lots of influence here on games in the future. One of which those precise controls and doing like all the little things, the individual actions, reminded me a lot of how Dark Souls has, my hand is on this button, my other hand's on this button, my roll is on this button. Similar.
Yeah.
Very similar. Yeah. But also the idea that there's no constant music in this game, but there are like stingers and action music when necessary and like secret reveal sounds and
in my notes I wrote that as a strength, that the sparseness of the music is really good. Like, it's very atmospheric when you're exploring, and the music only kicks in at those specific moments. So when you do get the music, it's great. It fits so well with that moment, but I like that they don't overuse it, right? They let you kind of feel immersed in the tombs and in the different places you're in, Egypt and Greece, and they only insert it when necessary. I think that's such a great decision.
Yeah, I love that. I love that so much. It really feels special. I was actually I was recording the retro pre-play when one of the earlier moments like that happen, when you step into one of those rooms in, I guess, the city of Villa whatever. And now you have to do this sort of platforming bit, but you get, I think it's just the main Tomb Raider theme, which is fantastic. Just like those 4 notes. And I just stopped and I was like, that's so cool. Listen to that music.
Yeah. It really hits you, that first time.
I love it. So good. And like all the tracks are really good. That fighting track is very adrenaline pumping. Oh, I love it. I love the music. And the voices, Lara's voice is great.
Yeah, the voice acting is good when it's there. Yeah.
She's like posh, but kind of tough.
Kind of no nonsense. But
yeah. Different. I feel like this is part of what people get from this first game versus later games. I feel like maybe she loses some of her edge later.
Yeah, 2013, she feels more helpless in a lot of situations. And there was even the controversy of how she dies in that game, like all these grisly deaths she has. And I do feel like you're absolutely right that there is an edgier Lara Croft here, like more wisecracking, more
she's in
more
charge.
Kind of action
she commands
movie.
The room.
Right. Like, you have to think, right, these games like Uncharted and Tomb Raider, you even mentioned the Indiana Jones inspiration and how they were going to go with that originally. And I feel like her personality speaks to that spirit, right, of an Indiana Jones, wisecracking, but smart, but edgy, still gets into danger, but is always, confident. And I feel like I like that Lara Croft more than the one we get in later games, but there's just not enough of her because there's barely any story.
Definitely. I didn't finish the game, unfortunately.
I didn't either.
Where'd you get to?
I think I got to. Was it like some sanctuary place? I think.
Oh, Sanctuary of the Scion. Oh, by the way,
yes,
they pronounce it Scion in this game.
They do.
I thought it was just Larson, and I thought it was just because he was like dumb, but I think Lara says it also. But like Scion is a word, guys.
Yeah. Scion is a word, and that's how it's pronounced.
And I asked 2 people from the UK how it was pronounced today. So I was like, okay.
He did his research, everyone.
So this is wrong on every continent. It isn't just like that's how they say it over there. So yeah, that would have been the last part of Egypt. I made it to I think the 2nd level in Egypt, and those first 2 levels in Egypt were really good too. I liked kind of Midas, the cistern, the tomb of Tihaken.
The Midas stuff's cool.
Yeah. I didn't love the Colosseum though. It was just like too big. It was too much like getting. It's kind of the same problem that we had with Banjo-Tooie a couple months ago, where like you just had to go really far to get there. I mean, nowhere near. I shouldn't have even said that. Banjo-Tooie is the worst game I've played on this podcast. But
yeah, I haven't. I need to listen to that episode. I haven't heard it yet, but I know on social media or in the Discord, you were mentioning that.
Yeah, yeah. But that level, the Colosseum, was just like kind of a low point once the game actually got started, and then it ramped up nice. Yeah, I guess that's all I got. So at the end of every episode, this is what we do. We decide whether a game that we've played for the first time or replayed was worth playing or replaying. And if it was, we call it a smash. And we would recommend that people revisit it in 2024 and beyond. And if it's not, well, then it's a brick. So, Anthony LaBella, what is Tomb Raider? Smash or brick?
Tomb Raider is an absolute classic. It is a huge smash. It is, of these episodes I've done with you, this is my favorite game I've played. More than GoldenEye. GoldenEye has the nostalgia. I grew up with GoldenEye. It's one of my all-time favorite games. But in terms of my actual enjoyment in, recent years, I liked Tomb Raider more than Echo the Dolphin, more than Crash Bandicoot, more than GoldenEye, more than any episode I've done. I genuinely loved my time with it.
Nice. And as for me, I'm going to go ahead and say Smash also. It's almost like required reading. If you care about the history of video games, you should have played Tomb Raider. I feel almost guilty that it took me this long to get this deep into the game because, as I said, it's brilliant. Just the whole system of the traversal, the way that they handled that for the year 1996, right? Like, come on. This was so good. Everything we said, maybe a little less combat, or if they could have tweaked the combat, that would have been nice.
Honestly, if there was no combat, I think this might be one of my all-time favorite games. Whoa. I think the combat detracts from it that much.
Wow. But that also means that you love the navigation that much, too.
I love the navigation, the platforming, all that so much.
Yeah. God, if I would have played this all the way through in 1996, I feel like I would have a totally different perspective on, like, favorite games. I think this would be up there. Because it's kind of the same thing like Prince of Persia, The Sands of Time, or Assassin's Creed. It's like one of those moments where you're exploring, or even Super Mario 64, which was right at the same time, where you're exploring your space. And my thing in games, one of my favorite components is exploration and discovery and physical navigation. Yeah, this would have definitely been one of those moments where like, oh my God, this is so cool. Look at how I climb all over this stuff. And it's so real. But I just didn't quite give it the chance in 96 or 7, whenever. But total smash. Total smash.
Yeah, it's not too late, folks. Everyone, go out and play Tomb Raider 1.
Yeah, just be ready for 1996 in your hands.
put yourself in the mind of 1996.
Yeah.
Yes.
So with that, Tomb Raider is a smash and was/is worth revisiting in 2024 and beyond. Thank you everyone for listening and for playing along with us if you did. And thanks Anthony for playing this game. And everyone, tell your friends, if you like this show, if you like playing games along with us, if you like not playing games and just listening to our experience, tell someone who you think would like the show. That would be kind of the best thing you could do to help the show. And other than that, you can go on any podcast platform and rate us the highest rating. Because if you're listening, then you must like the show. And if you have any reason to rate it lower, just send me an email. And I'll fix it. We'll make the show better.
It's just that easy.
Yeah, just like that. Whatever you want. If you want to support the show further, you can go to patreon.smashingbricks.com. You can become a patron for as little as $1 a month. There are a bunch of tiers. You can get a bunch of different things. You can choose games we're going to play. You can get a bonus episode every single month for only $5, which is super cool. I love doing them. We're about to do one. It's going to be great. It's about the best controllers or our favorite controllers of all time. Really cool. You can get ongoing recognition on the show like Tanuki level supporter Ms. Muzo is getting right now. And if you join at the highest tier, you could even join like Anthony is doing. Except you will be someone who I don't know. And we'll play a game together and it'll be great.
It'll be great.
It'll be great. Go to discord.smashingbricks.com to join the Discord. It's free. You just go in there, chat about anything you want, any of the upcoming or past games, make suggestions about games we're going to play, whatever you want. Brick Smashers are there. You can find all the links at links.smashingbricks.com. And as for next episode, I'll be joined once again by Leon Cox from the Cane and Rinse podcast. Amazing podcast. And it will be a Power Up episode. We're going to be playing Fable from 2004, a 20-year-old game from Lionhead Studios.
Wow.
And Mr. Peter Molyneux. So go get your hands on a copy of that, play along, send in your thoughts, and join us next time on Smashing Bricks. That wraps it up for today. I'm still Eddie Inzauto. That is Anthony LaBella.
Thanks for having me. Bye, everyone.
Until next time, may the nostalgia be with you.